Okay, well, here we go with lesson 8.8. Okay, we just did line plots. Okay, but now we're going on to something called perimeter and area. Some of you are already familiar with this, so maybe some of this isn't new to you, but maybe some of you it is. Students will be able to use a formula for perimeter and area for a rectangle. Okay, so we're going to focus on perimeter and area, and today we're just focusing on perimeters because when you do, or rectangles, when you do perimeter and area of other objects, this formula and rule is not going to apply. So this is just for rectangles. Okay, so let's take a look. Some of you, this might be a review, but perimeter is the distance around, okay, the edge. So if I were to start here, okay, and if I were to walk this edge, it's basically saying how far would I walk. It's like if you built a fence around a property. So perimeter is how long is the distance around an object, okay? In this case, a rectangle. An area is the space the rectangle takes up. So here's your length and here's your width. An area is basically talking about the spot that the square would take up or the rectangle would take up. Okay, so it's the inside space. So like if you had a kitchen floor or something like that and you wanted to tile it or put carpet in your living room, you're going to have to figure out how big your floor is to order enough material. So you need to measure it. So like if you had a rectangular square room, you take your tape measure and measure one side, measure the other side, you multiply the two numbers, and you know how big your room is. And then you go to your carpet store and say, I need like 400 square feet of carpet. And they're like, okay, so here's your 400 square feet of carpet, and you could install it. Okay, so this is the two things we're going to focus on today. Perimeter and area of a rectangle. Okay, so your homework is just basically a picture straight from the homework sheet, and then it asks you to identify the perimeter and the area. The tricky part is going to be not this, where you're like, well, perimeter, add it all up, or area, just multiply. You're going to get problems with fractions. Okay, so it's not just going to be as simple as like 3 times 2. So you're going to have to really review how do you add and subtract, or not subtract, but how do you add fractions? Adding fractions is easy when you have common denominators, but it's not easy when you don't. And then also, how do you multiply fractions? Okay, so and then also then if it's a mixed number, you have to figure out how to get it to improper and then multiply and then get it back. So the problem isn't going to be like, it's not going to be real simple where it's just going to be like, okay, well, here's a 3 and here's a 2, right? So our perimeter with like something that's a 3 by 2 would be 3 plus 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, like 10, right? It'd be 10, or for the perimeter, or it would be 3 times 2 is 6 would be for the area. It's not going to be that easy, okay? Because that would be a little bit more elementary type multiplying. So we have to multiply with some fractions, okay? So let me erase this. Just remember that perimeter is the distance around an object, and area is the length times the width, okay? So I'm going to write perimeter equals, add it up, add all 4 sides, and area is going to be length times width. Okay, so P is perimeter, A is area. That's what's on your homework, so it's going to ask you for P, and it's going to ask you for A. Okay, and P is perimeter, and A is area. So don't ask me that question, what does P and A mean? Because if you're watching, you should know. Okay, so if we take a look at our first problem on page 255, it says practice with area. It says find the perimeter and the area of the rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to basically maybe just draw a basic rectangular square, and I'm going to just kind of swap the numbers in and out. So this is a 1/2 centimeter, right? And the other length is also a 1/2 centimeter. So that's a square, because they're all the same. And then it's going to be asking you for what's the P and what's the A. All right? So perimeter, we add up all the sides, and area, we have to multiply. They start you off real nice with the first one. So if this is a 1/2, the other side has to be a 1/2 centimeter. And if this is a 1/2, then this has to be a 1/2 centimeter. Since it's a square, they're all 1/2 centimeters. But if you want to add it all up, for perimeter, you would say 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. Okay, so it's 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. Might be a little small for you to see, but you should know a 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. Okay, you add up the numerator. So the numerator is 4. And when you add fractions, you keep the denominator. So it's 4 over 2. Okay, so it's 4 over 2 centimeters, but you should recognize that 4 over 2, okay, is an improper fraction. So to get it out of an improper fraction, we divide. So we take the top divided by the bottom. So we take that 4 divided by the 2. So what's 4 divided by 2? 2. Okay, so the perimeter is 2 centimeters, but that makes sense because a half a centimeter plus a half a centimeter is 1. And then plus 2 more halves is equal to 2. So our perimeter is actually 2 centimeters. This must be a pretty small little square. Now area, you just multiply, okay? And you just multiply length times width. So you just do the two numbers multiplied. So the area is 1/2 times 1/2. I like putting it inside the square sometimes because it tells me that it's inside the area, right? So a half times a half. So this is great because multiplying fractions, you just go straight across. So 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so our area is actually 1/4 centimeter. Okay, so it is 1/4 centimeter. So that's our area. Our area is 1/4 centimeter. Okay, so that's what we're doing there. Let me just check to make sure what's coming up next. I think we're just going to stay on that same page and just work through a couple of these problems. Okay. One thing I want to remind you about with area is you need this little 2 up there. I don't know if you'll be able to do it on your computer because I don't know how to get that little 2 up there, but it's really 1/4 centimeter squared because it's 2 dimensions. Okay. If you don't put the square on your homework, I understand because I don't know how to type it on there, but it's actually 1/4 centimeters. Or what you could do is you could say 1/4 SQCM, square centimeters. That's the same thing, SQCM. So if you put 1/4 SQCM, that's like saying 1/4 centimeters squared. Okay, so you can choose to do the SQ and then CM. All right, so I'm gonna leave the centimeters or the perimeters and the areas up because we know that we're going to do perimeter and area for all of our assignments, all of our numbers. Okay, so then the next problem there is 2 meters and the top is 10 4/5 meters. See, it's with fractions. So that's where this might bust you up, is to understand how to work with the fractions. But don't let it stop you, okay? So we're going to do perimeter first, so we need to do the how far is it around. We know this is 2, and we also know this is 10 4/5, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 10 4/5 plus the 10 4/5 first, because I want to just kind of get the fractions out of the way. So 10 4/5 plus 10 4/5, all right? So you have to have knowledge about how can I combine those two with 4/5 plus 4/5, right? Or you have to go into improper, and then you have to go back, okay? Because watch this. So if I want to turn this into improper, then I can add them together, right? So improper, okay, you go around the horn. I always taught going around the horn. So you take the denominator times the whole number plus the numerator, right, to get your improper fraction. So it's 5 times 10 is 50, plus the 4 is 54, and then you keep the denominator, okay? And since this is the same, it's going to be just 54 over 5. So what is 54 plus 54, and keep the 5 for the new denominator, right? So 54 plus 54 is, anybody got it? 108? Okay, so 108. All right, so it's 108/5. Okay, so then you'd have to figure out 108/5 divided by 5. Okay, so it's 108. I'm just going to grab my calculator and cheat here for a second. 108 divided by 5 is 21. So we're close to 21. So it's 21, because 21 times 5, let's see, 21 times 5 would be 105. Okay, so we have a remainder of 3, right? A remainder of 3, right? And it was over 5, so it's going to be a remainder of 3/5. Okay, so it's 21 and 3/5, all right? So this is 21 and 3/5, but now we have the 2 and the 2, right? So 2 plus 2 is 4, so we have to add 4 back onto this 21 and 3/5. So we're going to add 4 to it. So just count up 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So it's 25 and 3/5. Okay, so that's our perimeter. So our perimeter is 25 and 3/5. All right, so that could be tricky because you need to be adding those fractions. Okay, so like I said, this isn't just this easy whip through it kind of problem because it's got fractions in it. All right, so area is going to be multiplying. So we have to take 10 and 4/5 times 2. Oh, I shouldn't have erased that because I should have kept this as 54/5, right, times 2 over 1, right? So 54/5 was my 10 and 4/5, right? And then times 2 over 1. So 54 times 2, hey, we did that before. It's 108 over 5. Huh. This is kind of looking like the perimeter and the area might end up being pretty close to each other. Okay, so 108 over 5, didn't we already do that? There's also 25 and 3/5. And then we have to do our little abbreviations, or our, there we go. Okay, so that's that problem. All right, so let's do the next one. Okay, ooh, this one might not be so bad. 9. Okay, 9 actually has really nice numbers for you. It's 4 inches and 5 inches. Okay, so perimeter, area. Okay, so perimeter is just you go around and add it all up, right? So 5 plus 4 plus, whoops. There we go. I would have gotten the right answer, just put it in the wrong spot. So 5 plus 5 is 10, and 10 plus 8 is, so we have 18 inches, okay, for our perimeter. And then our area is just going to be 5 times 4, which is 20. 20 inches squared. Yeah, that's kind of the easy one where there's not anything to have to deal with fractions, okay? Like number 10 is kind of tricky because that one's got some fractions you're not going to like. You're not going to like adding number 10 together. Okay, so number 10 is a rectangle, and we have 2/3 over here. And then we have 1 and 4/5, and 1 and 4/5, and this is going to be 2/3, right? So we're going to do perimeter, and we're going to do area. All right, so our perimeter is add them all up. So we'd have to say 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 1 and 4/5 plus 1 and 4/5. But you can see right now this isn't going to be pretty because we have thirds, we have fifths, and we also have mixed numbers. So my goal would be maybe to fix this right here first, get this out of a mixed number and get it to an improper fraction. Okay, so I'd say 5 times 1 is 5, right? And then 5 plus 4 is 9. So this becomes 9/5. And this becomes 9/5. All right, so now the problem becomes we're dealing with thirds and we're dealing with fifths, okay? So 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 9/5 plus 9/5. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually add these two up and add these two up. So I'm only dealing with 2 fractions. So 2/3 plus 2/3 equals 4/3 plus 9/5 plus 9/5 equals 18/5. See, this isn't about perimeter and area anymore. This is about remembering how to do the fractions. Okay, so here's the problem is now we have the 3 and the 5. We have to get rid of those because we can't add a 3 and a 5 together when we're dealing with fractions. We have to get a common denominator. Okay? What I like to do to find a common denominator sometimes is I just multiply the two numbers. So what's 3 times 5? That's 15. Okay? So then we're going to get some new fractions with 15s on the bottom. Okay? So over here, I took the 3 and I take it times 5 to get to 15, right? So that's my magic key over here is taking it times 5. So if I take this bottom times 5, which you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So my top is 4 times 5, which is 20. Okay, so we have 20 15ths. Over here on this one, I took it times 3 to get to it. So 5 times 3 is 15. So I'm going to do 18 times 3 to get the top. So I do 18 times 3, 24, 54. So it's going to be 54 15ths. Now I can add those together. Now we're getting somewhere. Woo! Let's drop a marker. So I have 15ths on the bottom. What's on the top? 74 15ths. Okay? And so then what I need to do is I need to take 74 divided by 15. All right? So what is 74 divided by 15? All right, let's think about this. Let's take a guess. 15. Okay, so we could do our multiples, right? 15, 30, 45, 60, 75. Okay, well, 75 would be too much. All right, so we would say 74 divided by 15. We could say, let's make that a, what did I say? 5 was too much? What did I say? I can't remember. 15, 30, 45, 60. Yeah, 5's too much, so we have to make it a 4. Okay, 4, and then 4 times 15 is 60, so we were still far away. So 74 minus 60 would be 14. So it's actually 4 and 14 fifths. If I add 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 1 and 4 fifths plus 1 and 4 fifths, it actually equals 4 and 14 15ths. That's kind of crazy. Okay, so our perimeter is going to be 4 and 14 15ths. And I think it was, what's the problem? The problem's in centimeters. So it's going to be centimeters. All right, so that's going to where you're going to get frustrated and where you're going to get bogged down is when you have to add those guys up and they're not the same. Area is going to be a little nicer for you because multiplying fractions is so much easier. So we had 2/3 times this 1 and 4 fifths. All right, but we can't keep it at 1 and 4 fifths. Remember what it is at improper? Okay, it's 9 fifths. All right, so then we take 2 times 9 is 18. 3 times 5 is 15. So we have 18 15ths, but we want to make sure we can't say 18 15ths because it's improper. Okay, so we have to divide. 18 divided by 15 is going to be 1. Right, there's 1, 15, and 18. We keep the denominator, right? 1 times 18, or 1 times 15 is 3 short of 18, right? So we have 3 left over. So our answer for our area is actually 1 and 3/15 centimeters squared. Okay, so like I said, perimeter and area is probably not too bad to know, but it's remembering all of those fraction rules, right? Like how to find common denominators, how to go from mixed numbers to improper, and how to go to improper to mixed. Okay, so maybe now is like a really good time to do a quick review. If I have 2 and 2/3, right? How do I make that an improper fraction? Right? I always say take the denominator times the whole number, and then you add the numerator, and that's your new top. So 3 times 2 is 6, 6 plus 2 is 8, and then you just keep the same denominator. Okay, so you get 8/3. All right, It works the same way going backwards. So if you started with 8/3, right, you would say 8 divided by 3. How many 3's go into 8? Okay, well, 3, 6, 9. So 3 is too much, so I know it's 2. So I'd write down the 2, right? And I would keep the same denominator. What you could do here is you could multiply these two, right? 3 times 2 is 6. How far away is that number from your original? Well, 2 spots away. So it's 2 2/3. So you need to know how to do that. Okay, and you also need to know how to do something like this. We'll say 2/3, right? You can't add a quarter and 2/3 together because the 4 and the 3. But like I said before, I like to multiply the 4 and the 3 together. Okay, so my new problem becomes 12, right? Because if I multiply 4 times 3, you get 12. Okay. On this side, I took it times 3 to get there, so that's the key. Okay, so 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 3 is 3. So over here, I have 3 times 4 gives me 12. So then 2 times 4 gives me 8. Okay, so if I add 3 12s plus 8 12s, I get 8 plus 3 is 11. So I get 11 12s. So really, maybe I should have started the lesson with this. But maybe if you're getting stuck and confused, you have to review how do you go from improper to mixed, mixed to improper, and also how do you add fractions with unlike denominators, right? So that's really the issue with this lesson. Okay, it's not necessarily about perimeter and area. All right. I want to do one more type problem with you. Okay, it is okay. So let me show you this first. Okay, so if I say area of something is length times width, right? Okay, this is important because this will take you to the next level. If I say area equals length times width, right, I could take length times width and get my area. But what happens if I actually, if I know my area, I know my length, but I don't know what one of my, like what my width is? Okay, so if you have area and you have length, you'd have to figure out what this is. So you're like, well, I can't just take length times width anymore. What I need to do to find width equals, is I actually take area divided by length, okay? And it's the other way around too. Let's say I have area and I have my width, but I don't know what my length is, okay? Length is equal to area divided by width, okay? So up here we have to look at this equation. If we have length and width, we multiply them. If we're missing one of these two, we have to divide. And I'll show you how to do one of those problems right now. So let me add this to equations up here. If I need my width, I take area divided by length. If I need my length, I take area divided by width. Okay, so like on problem 11 here, problem 11 actually is missing that value, and it has a value of 4.8 over here, and it actually tells you what the area is. The area is 29.76. Okay, and I believe it's in meters. So we don't know how much is up there. Okay, so let's start filling it in. Okay, so area equals length times width, right? We have the area, so 29.76 equals, we don't have the length, but we have the width. Okay, like I told you before, if we want to find length, we have to actually take the area divided by the width. So I actually have to divide these two numbers. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take my area, 29.76, and I'm going to divide it by 4.8. All right, so this now is going to tap into, can you divide decimals? 29.76 divided by 4.8. Now, the question about calculators, I don't know, maybe you should be able to grab a calculator at this point. Just say 29.76 divided by 48.48, 4.8. Okay? You could do that, or you could try to solve it. Remember, you can't divide by a decimal. So this outside becomes 48, and then I have to shift the decimal in here, so that it becomes 7.6. Right? And then you just have to kind of run the math. Okay? 48 doesn't go into 2. Okay? 48 doesn't go into 29, but 48 does go into 297. Okay, I'm going to pretend that's like 50. How many times does 50 go into 300? Well, I would say 6 times. So let's see if 48, let's see what 48 times 6 is. If 48 times 6 is around 297, we got it. Okay, 6 times 8 is 48. 6 times 4, 24, 25, 26, 27, 288. So it is under this 297, so we're okay with 6. So 6 times 48 is 288. And I'm going to subtract those. Okay? So 297 minus 288, I need to borrow here. Okay? 8879. Okay? Then I'm going to bring down the 6. How many times does 48 go into 96? I think 48 goes in 96 twice. Let's try 48 times 2. 8 times 2 is 16. 4 times 2 is 8. Look at that, 96. So it is twice. So I take 2 times 48 to get 96. I have no remainder. So my answer is actually 62. Okay, so actually, and then I forgot to kick up my decimal. Bad mistake, Mr. Black. So the decimal goes between the 6 and the 2. And so actually, my length is 6.2. When I saw the 62, when I was going to put 62 up here, I was like, wait, that's only 4.8. This can't be 62. I know I did something wrong. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot my decimal. Okay, so our length of our rectangle is 6.2, and our width is 4.8. Okay, so you have to apply these equations to some of your problems. All right, I know the video is getting kind of long. I think I might just do one more for you. Let's see if you've lasted this long in a video. It's one of the longer ones I've done. Okay, so look at number 14. Okay, number 14 has a rectangle, and I think it says it's a half a yard on one side, and I think it's 7. The area equals 7 square yards, and it doesn't know how much this is. Okay, so it's length times width, right? Area equals length times width. We have 7 equals 1/2 times we don't know. Okay, so I'm going to basically be taking 7 divided by 1/2 to get my answer. Okay, 7 divided by 1/2 to get my answer. This one's not so bad. This is a good one to do, though, because if a fraction is division, you can't do it. You have to keep it, change it, flip it, right? So what I could do is I could put this over 1. Don't forget that. So I keep it, change it to multiply, and I flip it. Okay, keep it, change it, flip it. So then 7 times 2 is 14. 1 times 1 is 1. Okay? 7 times 2 is 14. 1 times 1 is 1. So I get 14 over 1. 14 over 1 can't stay that way. 14 divided by 1 equals 14. So that one actually isn't too bad. So we know that the length of this is 14 yards. Okay? So I think the big thing to remember in this whole lesson is to review how do you work with decimals and fractions. But the big thing is right here. Okay, and maybe I could put this on your homework, that perimeter, okay, you add up all the sides, area is length times width. Now for these two, if you have the area, you just take the area and divide it by either width or you divide it by length. You have to watch out. If you have the area already, then you're dividing by the other one. If you don't have area, you can multiply. If you do have the area, you just divide it by the other one. Okay, so sorry about the 30-minute video. This one you might have questions on, but you have to know how to do fractions and decimals. All right, so there you go. That's probably the last lesson of the week. Tomorrow, probably going to have a quiz for you for 8, 6, 7, 8. Let's see, 8, 8, 8, 7, 6, 5. So lesson 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's what your quiz will be on tomorrow. All right, there you go.